make some sense of it all, but I can see it makes no sense at all. Is it cool to go to sleep on the floor? 'Cause I don't think that I can take anymore. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was a minute away and then I started streaming and then it told me it wasn't streaming and I killed the stream and it said, no, you can't kill the stream. It's still streaming. And I was like, what is going on? So apologies for being ridiculous this morning and late. I got things dropped in my lap at 10 that I had to deal with and it took me until now and I'm kind of still dealing with it. So it's one of those things. And I usually like say good morning. So apologies about all of that. Freeland doesn't like the China deal. I'm shocked. The godfather of her children is being criticized, and she's the one doing the criticism. And isn't that weird? It's just weird. I don't know. It's a weird thing. Canada is helping Cuba, and we're going to start there. We're not going to start there. We're going to start somewhere else, but we're going to meaningfully look at Cuba. And I think this is a bad idea because the whole pressure campaign that the United States is waging is in order to target and deal with Cuba and communist countries. And Canada's like, hey, you other communist country, you. We're gonna help you because, quote, humanitarian aid is necessary or whatever. And I don't think it's the responsibility of the West. I don't think it's the responsibility of Donald Trump to free Canada. It's our responsibility to do that. Otherwise, it's an occupation, and people will say, "Oh, they're occupying our government. They're not legitimate." Blah 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 blah. And if the United States, and I mean, like Venezuela, I think there's maybe issues with that, but we'll see. Apparently, Trump's made partners with the Venezuelan government, so I don't know how that's going to go. But if you go in and you impose your will on another country, even if it's the correct will, or if I agree with the will, or whatever it is, or if it's in the vein of the Magna Carta and am I saying that right? And freedom and all that stuff, I'm down with it. But you're still going to get the communists who use that as a wedge and say, "Oh, it's illegitimate, it's illegitimate," and people will say, "Well, I guess it kind of is." And so it is our responsibility to free ourselves. It is their responsibility to free themselves. But if you are starving, you're not going to sit around and say, "Well, these guys know what they're doing." You're going to stand up and say, "I'm pretty sure I could do a better job." And if you use the apparatus of the state to crush me, then you don't work for us. And I'm gonna respond in kind, right? Crush you instead. Canada is helping Cuba, and I don't think that's a good idea. Iran has been 6 months away from a nuclear bomb since 1995. Yep. Every other day, they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's tomorrow. They're going to have a nuclear bomb. We should go in today." And I think that's hinky. I think that there's something weird about that. And what else? Kung Fu robots. We're starting with Kung Fu robots. Somebody sent this to me and they said, "Can you wait till they have guns on their head?" And I said, "Well, they're definitely going to have guns on their head soon." I also had, just before we get started in the show, people have already been messaging me saying, "Hey, your show's not posted." So apologies that I'm kind of inconsistent with that. I get slammed. I get all sorts of emails in the morning, people asking for my help and stuff. And I try and weave this in right through. But some days, man, some days shit hits the fan and I have to deal with it. So we're working on the show. It's out there right now, everybody. Okay. So Chinese Kung Fu robots with guns on their head. Everybody seems very comfortable with this building Terminators. Everybody seems very comfortable standing around with their extra 15 pounds of delicious chocolate weight and things like that. Chocolate cereal weight, whatever it is, whatever you're carrying around, watching these robots and they think to themselves, "Ooh, I'm glad this robot is going to protect me," but it's not going to protect you. This is a Terminator, people. We are just sleepwalking into did you not watch Terminator 1 and Terminator 2? Holy smokeronies. Come on. Time travel? We are traveling through time right meow, right? Look at your clock. We are traveling slowly, but at the speed time moves, but we are traveling into the future. And we're just kind of idly watching these Terminators be birthed. And everybody's like, "Ooh, look at them jump." Yeah, can you do that? No. Does your strategy change if you're fighting a Kung Fu robot? Here's Kung Fu robots in China. It looks more like a dance at this point in time, but I promise you, if that thing was trying to karate chop your head off, it wouldn't be so dancey. And I remember the putties in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I would imagine that you could put a whole TV show together with the good robots and the bad robots, and people would be like, "This is great." The same way Power Rangers was cringy, but also great. I watched Power Rangers before I went to school most days. I was a child of the 90s. What can I say? Also, Peter Pan and the Pirates, which it was just out of copyright, and they just decided to make a Peter Pan show. I don't know. Maybe for Hook. Anyway, Holly Doan said feds gave Cuba an advance of $8 million in yearly foreign aid before April 1st. Emergency shipments of Canadian petroleum products to ease fuel shortages were not considered, according to the minister and Nita Anand, which, I don't believe it. And the way they frame this news article, this is the Canadian press. Listen to the framing of this. It's not a communist country is declining and being destroyed through economic sanctions that Trump is orchestrating and has been orchestrating for the last 6 months. And this is bearing the fruit of those things. If you can just sit comfortably and people will give you food and drop grapes into your mouth, why are you going to work? Right? And if the Americans are just going to allow the Canadians to send all of this stuff, you've got to save your country, man. And I don't want people to starve. I'm not saying I want people to starve or anything like that. But if you give free food, how does the bread maker make money? What motivates the bread maker to go out and make his bread, right? What motivates the farmer to go out and do the fields and all that other stuff? If you give free food, you're inverting all of the economic incentives, and it's bad. But listen to the framing of this article. Canada is sending $8 million in food aid to Cuba, where a U.S. oil blockade has triggered a humanitarian crisis. It's a communist country, and we should not be feeding communists. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand and MP Randeep Sari, not from India, from Canada, Secretary of State for International Development, said Wednesday the funding is meant to address urgent needs. Urgent needs. How about you get rid of your communist government? And then we can talk. And then we can have all sorts of food for you guys who are not communist anymore, right? Get rid of your communist government and then we'll talk. But I don't want to support a communist government in Cuba, right? Come on. The money will be delivered through United Nations. So we're giving $8 million, but the Cubans are going to get none. Because the United Nations will say, well, this is all for processing. $8 million? Wonderful. Thank you so much. The UN loves that money. The humanitarian situation in Cuba is becoming quite grave, they said. Global Affairs Canada has warned travelers for more than a year of shortages of basic necessities, but it's not on the resorts, and people don't care. People go to Cuba now. People will probably go to the airport today to get on a plane to go to Cuba. If somebody said, you've won a free trip to Cuba, they'd be like, oh, great, thanks. Yeah, so good. And they'd go. And that's not good. Unified with Kels says, let me get this straight. We're told budgets are tight. Aid envelopes are being cut. Canadians are struggling with food and housing costs, yet billions keep leaving the country. $2 billion to Ukraine yesterday, $8 million to Cuba today. 2 days ago for the one and yesterday for the other. I believe in helping people. I genuinely do. Cubans need help right now. But at what point are Canadians allowed to ask, where's the limit? Because this isn't about one payment. It's a constant flow outward while people at home feel like they're falling behind. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you run a country like that? And the longer you run a country like that, worrying about absolutely everybody else, pretty quickly people say, I'm going to stop worrying about everybody else and I'm going to worry about Canadians. And then people will say, oh, yeah, I guess we should stop sending all of our tax dollars outside of the country and then vote for that guy, except our elections are rigged. So Jamil Javani says, moral panic keeps us distracted from solving problems at home. As Canadians, we should be concerned about putting our workers and businesses first. The $8 million that the Liberals are sending to Cuba's communist government is just the latest example. So that's not so great. Trade, and the food professor is talking about trade. He says, unsurprisingly, the U.S. trade representatives, so we're trying to do a deal with the United States. The United States is actively trying to take out communist nations around the world through economic force. We're undermining that effort by sending food to Cuba, and we have to negotiate a trade deal for Canada this year that Carney looks like he wants to scuttle. Although there are sometimes indications that he's fearful of that, and he'll acquiesce to certain things, like the Gulf Stream thing. Trump says we're not gonna have Bombardier in the United States if Gulf Stream's not in Canada, and they signed that. So that confuses me a little bit. They don't want to destroy the economy, but they do want to destroy the economy. I don't know, but I don't trust them at all. And the way they're acting, if I was the United States and I picked up the newspaper, like, what's Canada up to today? I'd be like, cut them off now. You communist, right? You communist people, you do not deserve the protection of the United States. Cut them off. I would be much more severe than Trump. When I look at Trump, I think to myself, he's being super nice. Like, we are acting in bad faith. If I was across the table from somebody who was acting like Canada, I wouldn't engage. I would just walk away. You people are lunatics. Go away. Go away. All of our leadership, every single one of them, all of them. The food professor says, unsurprisingly, the United States trade representatives said any new deal with Canada must include higher tariffs and expanded access for American businesses, regardless of what we do with any supply management. At this point, the issue isn't policy detail. In principle, the Americans simply want more access. So access, but I don't think it's going to work out. I don't think it's going to happen the way they expect. Ross says, Toronto Star's reporting, Ottawa says, India is no longer linked to violent crimes in Canada. Wonderful what happens when you stop looking for violent crimes happening in Canada via India, right? Just unbelievable. Ross says, did Brookfield sign a big contract? No, Carney's going to India today. So they needed to clean that mess up before Carney went there and had to talk about it. Chrystia Freeland, and I don't like Chrystia Freeland. We're not gonna listen to her. I'm not really interested in hearing what she has to say because she's ridiculous. But Dan gives us the Coles notes, and he says, quite a thing to hear former Liberal Deputy Prime Minister come out and say this. Prediction, this comment will be largely ignored as it is in contradiction to Carney's current direction with China. Harrison says, former Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland doubts the effectiveness of Canada's trade agreement with China, saying China should not be trusted. China today, when it talks to countries like Canada, is casting itself as the reliable partner. My own view is that we need to be a bit skeptical of commitments from China. A lot of Canadians are now coming to the conclusion that Beijing can be trusted more than Washington. I think that's really sad. So it's crazy upside down world today where I kind of agree with Chrystia Freeland, but don't let them mislead you because they will lie to you. As soon as you trust them, any little tiny bit, they will. If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Food Professor again says, to my ex-followers, this is a concerning post because our democracy is failing. I keep talking about how we're run by communists. I believe that's very true. I believe it's true at every single level. And I think the communists hate when I point it out. And there are censorship algorithms that look for that word. And I say it anyway, because if you don't say what the problem is, the government is run by communists, then you can't address it. And I refuse to be silenced by the ridiculous censorship laws. And I understand that they're silencing me, but I will not self-censor. I will not. It's not going to happen. So F them. Don't get vaccinated because they're lying about that. Don't listen to them about any kind of pandemic because they're lying about that. And I don't care who gets mad that I say that. Don't listen to them about the need for migrants either. And we should shut down the refugee pathways, and we should shut down the compact for migration. We should shut it all down. We should not tolerate this. There's no reason to tolerate this. The only reason we're tolerating this is because we're worried what these criminals are going to say about us. F them. I don't care. I don't care. The Food Professor says, to my followers, I've worked with the media for nearly 25 years. For most of that time, the relationship was professional and balanced, but in recent years, something has shifted. I'm increasingly concerned about the state of our democracy, particularly how media in general are informing Canadians about food policy, food inflation, and economic policy. I now find myself learning more about Canada's economy and policy changes from American outlets than from Canadian ones. Much of our national coverage feels reactive, shallow, or overly fixated on partisan narratives, Trump hate, rather than substantive policy analysis. What troubles me most is the lack of scrutiny applied evenly across governments and institutions. For example, when the Bank of Canada suggested that Ottawa's counter-tariffs contributed to food inflation, only one major outlet, Bloomberg, gave it meaningful coverage. The Grocery Benefit Program received very little examination regarding how it would be financed. It took days before anyone pressed for clarity. During the latest spike in food inflation, several outlets turned to the same small circle of commentators who dismissed any potential role of federal policy. Carbon pricing, GST holidays, counter tariffs, despite mounting evidence that that policy decisions can and do affect food prices. Instead of investigating structural drivers of inflation, much of the coverage focuses on fact-checking opposition rhetoric. Even though the opposition has not governed since 2015, scrutiny should be applied equally, not selectively. Quebec media, while imperfect, appear to have maintained a broader range of debate. In much of the rest of Canada, I see increasing concentration of voices, often from the same region, Ontario often reflecting similar policy perspectives, and less diversity of thought grounded in empirical research. This isn't about partisan politics, it's about accountability, transparency, and healthy democratic discourse. Media are under financial pressure, that's real, but public trust depends on independence and depth. Subsidy structures, incentives, and newsroom economics all matter. Canada deserves stronger policy journalism, especially on food affordability, supply chains, and economic resilience. We need more data-driven analysis, more intellectual diversity, and more courage to ask uncomfortable questions, regardless of which party's in power. Until that happens, Canadians would be wise to diversify their news sources and think critically about what they're being told and what they're not being told. True. They're misleading everybody about everything. Everything. Anything that you could possibly imagine, and some you can't possibly imagine, you're being lied to about. And I wish that weren't true, but it damn well is. Mark Nixon says, unimaginable amount of money. Liberals gave Brookfield $900 billion. Remember when we got the same amount? No, 900 million, almost $1 billion for we. These guys get 900 billion? Oh my gosh. Worth of contracts since 2015. And now Canada has a Brookfield prime minister. How is this even allowed to happen? Great work compiling this information to reclaim air. And he says, this is from December 29th, and I've covered this before. And he's talking, he says, I took the 2015 to 2025 financial data, made individual files for all payments by year, purpose, ministry, recipient, and then merged them into one file and merged them into single sums. From 2015 to 2025, Brookfield companies received $900 million from Canadian taxpayers. Whew. Very high, eye-wateringly high. Right? Rise of Alberta says Canada just imported LNG from Australia. Oh, I forgot to mention that at the top. 25,000 kilometers across the ocean, 4,000 kilometers from Alberta is somehow impossible. This isn't a resource problem. It's a Canada problem. If Canada won't develop Alberta's energy, why should Alberta stay in Canada? Very true. If I was the Premier of Ontario, I'd be making calls to Manitoba, and Manitoba would say no because Wab Kinew is a Liberal. NDP Liberal. And I'd call Scott Moe in Saskatchewan. He might say no because it seems like he's a globalist. And I'd call Danielle Smith in Alberta and say, I want to buy your oil. I want to buy oil to build a refinery in Ontario so I can supply the eastern province or the eastern provinces. And none of it would be able to happen because the people in charge of our government are communist assholes. Sorry, they just are. Kirk says, and have been for 40 years or more. More. Kirk says, besides importing foreign oil, Eastern Canada has now imported its first shipment of LNG from Australia. Instead of building infrastructure domestically to be self-sufficient, the self-described environmentalists prefer imports from a tanker that traveled 25,000 kilometers. Buy Canadian, right? Elbows up, morons. Raquel Dancho is responding to this whole thing. She says, let's get this straight. Canada has one of the largest proven natural gas reserves in the world, and we're importing the fuel from Australia. Weird. Liberals' failure to develop the strategic resource and its supporting infrastructure has left us dependent on others. This is a vulnerability. A strong, sovereign Canada proceeds from leveraging our suppliers, our own superpower, this nation's wealth of natural resources. But we're not allowed to develop those natural resources because reasons that are not very good reasons. Wealth Moose says $544 billion. That's how much Canada has spent importing foreign oil since 1988 from Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Venezuela, Russia, Angola, Malaysia, Norway, all while sitting on one of the largest, safest, most ethical oil reserves on earth. Why? Because Ottawa refuses to build a single east-west pipeline that would help Canada or keep Canadian energy in Canada and keep Canadian dollars in Canada and keep Canadian workers employed in Canada. For 36 years, we've been enriching dictatorships while bankrupting our own economy, all in the name of virtue. No serious country does this. Only Canada does. And we're not a serious country, unfortunately, because we don't behave in good faith. When we engage with people, we don't behave in good faith. The government doesn't behave in good faith when they negotiate with the citizens because they lie about everything, right? You'll stay locked down forever. I don't think I want to wear this mask. We don't care. You'll do it anyway. And you won't go on trains and you won't go on buses. They are evil and they shouldn't be in charge. Shouldn't be in charge. Juno News says the same thing. Atlantic Canada is set to receive its first shipment of Australian liquefied natural gas after shipping it 25,000 kilometers across the ocean instead of purchasing Canadian LNG from Alberta. Would love to be a fly on the wall for those conversations, eh? Mark Carney saying, oh, we don't want to buy Alberta oil. Right? We'll buy Australian oil. There you go. That'll sharpen it. What that does is it has a big number. Oil is expensive-ish. Not really expensive. It's cheap. But the supply is a lot, right? So it looks like a big number. And so they can say, we've diversified our trade. We've done so much money with all of these other places. And a lot of the money will be for like energy and things like that. That's an inflated price and costs more because it's traveling 25,000 kilometers, right? Shazzy says the Toronto's World Cup cost was originally projected at 30 to 45 million. It's now 380 million for 6 matches. Cool. That's $63 million per game. Vancouver up to $624 million for 7 games. That's $89 million per game. Canada's $1 billion to host 13 of 104 matches, about 12% of the tournament. American cities use private nonprofits. Canadian cities use taxpayers. So we're on the hook. We get to pay for the World Cup, even though we don't get to go. Ooh, get your vuvuzela out. Cedar Grove Weather Hub says 2015, focus on the middle class and those working hard to join it. 2026, close the liquor store. They're trying to make theft so bad that you have to shop on the internet, that you're either worried about going to the store because you might be assaulted, or you're worried about going to the store for other reasons. And so they want to, or the store's just not open because too much theft has closed it down. And then you can just order online. It's all for COVID. It's all the same thing. Zero COVID. You can't go out of your house. It's too dangerous. Now you can't go out of your house because they're making it too dangerous because they're importing the third world. Crazy, right? But they're just changing strategies, and we haven't even caught up to the first strategy yet. They're still flooding our countries. CBC is reporting NSLC closing downtown Halifax store following a surge in thefts. Shocked. I'm totally shocked. They're encouraging this. They don't even say morally you shouldn't steal. They're saying morally the state should give you lots more. Again, self-reliance and self-responsibility. When those robots show up, man, you better be able to figure out a strategy. I would have my fingers ready to hit its off button, right? Like, look at my kung fu, you robot. Conrad says, food professor, check out these Canadian steaks I bought in Maui. Note the prices. So for a 0.95 of a pound, it's $18.99, and $20.39 for 1.02 pounds. So pretty cheap. Want cheap Canadian beef, says the food professor? Go to Maui. So, Again, I think they're subsidizing the beef so they can make trade deals, so they can say, look at all the trade deals we've made, and we don't need the United States, and they're wrong. CBC Watcher says everything they touch, Transport Canada's officials were aware funding for their popular electric vehicle rebate program was at risk of running out several months before the department told the public about it in January 25. Documents about the program suggest. The documents also show officials were seemingly caught off guard by how quickly the funds did in the end dry up. The sudden pausing of the program in January 25 left dealerships on the hook for millions of dollars in outstanding claims, though the government would rectify it months later and left customers with the impression that rebates would return, sending a chill through the EV market as sales plummeted. Yeah, so people were waiting for the sales to come back, and they didn't, and so nobody bought the electric cars because they thought that the sales weren't coming back. So, and bad mismanagement, but again, I don't think it's accidental. They do everything they possibly can to screw the economy over, and shocks and shortages and all sorts of other stuff work to their advantage, not to their detriment. With that, I've got to say goodbye to the stream. We've got lots more of show. If you want the whole show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. If not, that's okay. I'll be around tomorrow. And this Sunday, just as a quick show note, I will not be available for a kitchen table talk, so we have to skip this week. Sorry, everyone. But I just found out because there's certain things I've got to go to, and they're happening Sunday at 1:30. So I definitely can't do it. So apologies about that. Anyway, we'll catch you next time.